Hello, everyone, and a huge thank you for joining us today for a discussion on stress-free boarding as a staff plus engineer. The webinar will last roughly 45 minutes, after which both myself and the panelists will head over to the LeadDev Slack to answer some of your questions in the Staff Plus channel. We may also have time to answer a couple of questions live, so please do submit those to the Q&A feature on Zoom, and we'll get to them if we can towards the end. So let's get started with some introductions. My name is Blanca Garcia Gil, and today I'll be joined by Erin, Jocelyn, Maxime, and Sally to share their experiences and insights. I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves. So let's go in alphabetical order by name. Could you please answer in 60 seconds, just about 60 seconds, who you are and what makes you excited about being on the panel today? So Erin, would you go first?
Sure. So hi, I'm Erin Doyle. For probably about the past year, I've been working as a staff engineer on our platform team at Lob. Prior to that, I had transitioned from over 20 plus years doing full stack development. I'm really excited about this topic today because when I started at Lob, it was the first role that I'd taken at the staff level at a new company. Previously, I'd been promoted up to staff plus positions at companies I'd been at for a little bit. So I really realized through that experience how much pressure there can be starting at a brand new company at this level of seniority. And I tried really to be really intentional about how I approached the onboarding. So, and then after that first year, I moved to our platform team and kind of had to repeat the onboarding process all over again. So now I've become really passionate about this topic.
Amazing. Thank you. And now, Jocelyn?
Yes, hi. My name is Jocelyn Harper. I am a staff software engineer and tech lead at the New York Times for our Care platform team. What made me really excited to join this panel is pretty much piggybacking off of what Erin said. This is my first role at such a level. And again, the pressure that comes with this, especially when, you're staff, so you're supposed to kind of come in trying to know what's going on, which isn't the case. So I'm really excited to share some tidbits about how to navigate that.
Thank you. Next up is Maxime.
Hello, everyone. My name is Maxime Najim. I'm currently a distinguished engineer at Target Tech. I have nearly 2 decades of experience in the tech industry. I've worked for major companies like Yahoo, Apple, Netflix, and Amazon. So I've experienced onboarding at a staff plus level multiple times in my career and at various companies. I recently started my current role a little over a month ago, and so I'm still in the process of onboarding right now. So I'm really excited to be part of this panel and share my experience and insights into onboarding at this level.
Thank you, Maxime. And last but not least, Sally.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sally Wahba. I'm a principal engineer at Splunk. I work in the observability area. I've been with Splunk for almost 2 years now. Before that, I was at NetApp working in operating systems for data storage for the most part. Overall, I have around 2 decades of experience between higher education and tech industry. I'm excited to be here with everyone to learn from the panelists and also share my experience as I transitioned within roles within the company, different companies, different tech domains. So I'm happy to share my experience with onboarding as well.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone, for introducing yourselves. I love that we have a mix of people who are just, onboarding now, veterans of like multiple onboardings, and I hope we all learn together here. So as we progress in our engineering careers, and we might be changing teams, roles, and companies, we go through a series of onboarding and offboarding processes. And like you already said, the added responsibility of being a very experienced engineer adds a stress and creates even more imposter syndrome for most staff plus engineers. So today we have brought you a group of people with a breadth of perspectives and roles to discuss what makes a successful onboarding and how to mitigate the stress that comes with the change. So first we'll start with a topic about how do you begin to kind of map and prioritize where you're going to spend your time as you join? So Jocelyn, we're going to start with you. What was it like for you when you onboarded your current role? Was there a plan shared with you, or do you have to kind of create your own?
It was a mix of both, actually. I think So the plan itself was very broad. It was something that was shared to all new engineers that were coming on to our team and our org, which was helpful, kind of figuring out their services and things like that. However, when it came to onboarding for my specific team, not so much, mainly because the team was new. And so the team actually formed in December and I joined in January. So super new. So for me, it was managing the priorities that the team had, and that really led into how I prioritized what I should learn first. So one of our things that we actually just finished up this month, so from January until now, was a huge migration that we had to do for our services. And so in the beginning, I got some advice like, oh, you don't have to worry about that because, that system's not going to be working anymore. And in terms of software engineering, I never listen to that because I feel as though that never goes to plan to decom a system. So for me, I wanted to make sure that I at least had all of the services, run through all of the documentation for the services, if there were documentation for the services, and kind of, making sure that I took whatever knowledge that I had with my skills that I had and was applying to just figuring that all out. One key thing that I do when I'm onboarding is I start writing down things that are missing in the onboarding process that I know that myself and other engineers would really like. And that's usually surrounding documentation and the ease of onboarding. So that's what I focus on the most.
Thank you. So let's move on to Erin and tell us how did you deal with the pressure of starting a new role with high responsibility, and what do you begin spending your time on?
Yeah, I certainly have felt a lot of pressure to prove myself probably every time I've started a new job. I've worried that people would be scrutinizing everything I did to see if I really deserve the job and the title. So I know I want to show them as fast as I can that they made the right choice in hiring me. I know what I'm doing and I can do the job. And I think Sally mentioned this, you're hired to be the expert and to help mentor and lead others. And I want to build their trust in me. So all of that can be really difficult to deal with this pressure when the first few weeks of a new job are probably going to be spent doing a lot of research and learning and building context and connections. So you may not be producing a lot of tangible deliverables right away. And whether any of this pressure is really there or it's all in my head, it's not something I can easily prove, and it probably doesn't really matter. In the end, it's not helpful thinking. So when those thoughts start to bubble up in my head, I try to redirect them. I remind myself of my past accomplishments and that I went through multiple interview rounds and multiple people together decided that I was worth hiring for this job. So, I'll never be the expert in all the things. And it's totally acceptable that I have things to learn and that does take time. But, I remind myself that I am the expert in some things and I do have experience that's valuable. And the people that chose to hire me must have seen that. So then I just adjust my expectations. I remind myself that the work I'm doing is important and it counts, even if it's not a deliverable like code or a design document or whatever. I need to take that time to ramp up so that I can be the most effective. So I put together an onboarding plan for myself so that I have an intentional path to follow and, really list off those items that are going to get me up to speed as fast as possible. But what else that helps me with is giving me that sense of progress and accomplishment, in that I'll have items I can check off as done. And I can share those discrete onboarding plans each day that I set up for myself. I can share those in my stand-up with my team. And then I can share what items I've gotten done day to day so that the team sees clearly what I'm focusing on, why I'm focusing on those things, and that I am making progress. I'm doing something, even if you can't see it. If that's still not enough for me to feel satisfied, then, maybe I do some code reviews or I find some really small tickets to work on between my onboarding tasks, just to kind of give me that feeling of delivering something. But I try not to let that pressure derail me from staying on my plan and end up wasting time working on things that aren't going to be the most valuable use of my time, or contribute the best bang for the buck during this ramp up phase?
Thank you, Erin. I love that we have had only 2 questions and very different answers, because both of you had an onboarding plan, but it sounds like Jocelyn was like, there's a mission, there's a new team, I have to like be head down on this. Whereas for you it was a lot more ambiguous and you had to kind of almost figure it out yourself. Now let's go with and hear from Sally, because Jocelyn already pointed out to documentation. And I know, Sally, you've said that when documentation exists, it can be very useful as part of the onboarding, but they can also be blind spot when reading technical documents. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So Jocelyn mentioned that when documentation, if they exist, so if you're lucky that there is documentation, it was hard for me to know whether I can trust this documentation or not. So I couldn't really go by how recent the documentation is, because there are some systems that have been stable and haven't really changed much. So that while the document looks old, it's still pretty valid. And then as another system is new, the documentation gets old very quickly because it gets updated often. So it was hard for me to assess what I can trust in the documentation. And another thing is, if I'm looking at the design document, for example, yeah, I can see the design, but I don't always see the why behind it and the iterations that happened. And for me, as someone who's new coming into an existing system, I lack all this context and history and the evolution of the product. So finding these gaps and trying to fill them, because in the end, I'm going to touch this system and I'm going to make changes. So learning the history of it was for me is really important. So like Justin mentioned, if some documentations don't exist, so creating that, filling in the gaps as I go along and as I learn new things. And it's an iterative process. So for me, as someone coming in new, I can easily point to the gaps because that's something that I don't know. And I had to go and find the answer versus someone who actually built this thing and it's just in the back of their head and they never thought about putting it in a documentation. So there is, as Erin mentioned, like that was one way I can contribute quickly compared to other existing people.
Amazing. Yeah, I've come across architecture decision records, which can tell you a bit about the why, but that doesn't happen in every team or every company. So yeah, it's definitely a very nice thing to have, but not always there. So back to Maxime now. You said you've done several onboarding processes as a Staff Plus. Can you tell us, do you have a bit of like a tried and tested process for how do you deal with imposter syndrome? Perhaps we can also learn here.
Yeah. I mean, imposter syndrome is experienced by nearly everyone at some point in their career. Even very seasoned engineers experience it, especially when you're joining a new company or stepping into a new role. And it may persist even after you've settled into your role. But it's important to understand that you won't have a complete grasp of your role right from the start. In fact, it may take 12 to 18 months or more to fully acclimate into a new role. So during your first 3 to 6 months, prioritize continuous learning and growth. These initial months can be a period of significant personal growth, is what I found. So one approach is to simply embrace the learning process, stay curious, collaborate with your manager to invest in time in your onboarding and development. Additionally, remember to recognize and utilize your strength. As Erin mentioned, you were not hired by accident and your promotion was not a mistake. So you were chosen for a reason. So look for quick wins during your onboarding that emphasizes your unique skills and experience that contribute to your team's success. And for any managers listening to this webinar, consider addressing imposter syndrome proactively with your team members and provide support to help them navigate the challenges that may arise during the onboarding of a Staff Plus engineer. And don't forget to celebrate achievements, even the small ones, as recognizing these wins can boost confidence and counter imposter syndrome.
Thank you, Maxime. Yeah, I think I'm going to take what you said and add, what Erin mentioned about being a bit positive. I think it's about being kind to yourself. I remember the last job I onboarded, I was trying to be transparent with the team. So I said, I don't know this yet, but I will get there. And I was trying to be openly kind because I think it also goes a long way to know for like this experienced team members that this is normal and is expected, because I kind of believe that at some point in my career, that imposter syndrome just kind of goes away, and you're like this kind of magic, super strong person, and nothing faces you, and that's not the case. Okay, so we're going to move on now to the topic number 2, which is approaches for getting up to speed quickly without feeling overwhelmed, because there's a lot to get on with. So now we're back to Erin. What have you seen managers do to help a staff plus engineers on board?
Yeah, so here at Lob, the onboarding process for every new hire actually includes a list of people that your manager puts together for you that you have to schedule a meeting with over your first few weeks to get to know them. And this list of people that your manager provides are people they think would be the most beneficial for you to connect with early on. And as an introvert, that was pretty daunting for me at first, to have to reach out to all these people that I didn't know and, out of nowhere, invite them to a meeting. But because every new hire has to do it, the process has been normalized. So everyone's used to having these sort of meeting invites coming from random new people. And after I went through the process, I realized it was such an incredible way to fast track my onboarding by building my network of go-to people early on and using these connections to get a download of the history and the context of the decisions and directions that were made before I started.
Amazing. Thank you, Erin, for being so candid about that, because I think, it seems like we all just kind of very open with people. And yes, we're open, but it does take energy. So, Jocelyn, what is the most important thing for you to get right when you're onboarding?
The most important thing for me was to not only provide context for myself, but provide context for my team members and my other colleagues. I think it's really important that you focus on that. Not a lot of teams have had a staff software engineer before. They're not quite sure where a staff engineer falls into the groove of things that they've already had, a routine already laid out. It's really important to, work with your manager to know what it is, because it can be kind of ambiguous if no one's ever thought about it. And I feel as though that was really catered to what my skill set was. Being a tech lead is a whole other thing on top of being a staff plus engineer, and making sure that I have that channel of communication open with other engineers on my team, just so they know where I fit into this large puzzle that they have going on. For me, I think it was really important that I didn't want to step on anybody's toes, kind of seeing where things are going, where the processes are, but also making sure that, I'm providing value and also those processes are moving along smoothly as well.
I like how we're already kind of anticipating the questions that are going to come up. So now, Maxime, how do you balance, getting that broader view? Already Jocelyn hinted, you're getting context, you're sharing context with kind of picking an area to focus on.
It's a great question, because it's important not to keep your head in the clouds for too long when starting in a new organization. So engaging in a collaborative project that requires working closely with others would be a big part of your onboarding. But this needs to be balanced with gaining a broader view as well. And this balance is a common struggle for Staff Plus engineers, not only during onboarding, but it'll be a challenge throughout your career. So it's essential to have a clear understanding of your role as a Staff Plus engineer. This typically involves a mix of technical leadership, mentoring, contributing to the overall technical strategy of your organization. So recognize that your primary responsibility is not only deep technical work, but also guiding and influencing the technical direction of your organization. So collaborate with your manager and team to identify high impact areas where your expertise and leadership can make the most significant difference. These areas should align with the organizational goals and challenges and opportunities. And while you're focusing on specific areas, make sure to stay informed about broader trends, emerging issues, and development that may impact your organization. Leverage one-on-one meetings, and get to know you sessions to collaborate with peers and colleagues, gaining insights and perspective from various domains. And regularly assess your focus areas. Are you making a positive difference in the area you're focusing on. Be data-driven, fine-tune your strategy, and try to maintain a delicate balance between the depth and breadth. And again, continue to invest in your personal growth and development. Strengthening your leadership, communication, and collaboration skills is essential for success as a Staff Plus engineer.
Wow, that sounds like a lot. Seriously, I'm like, how do you find time for that? And we have even, another question to add to this, which is, Sally, in your case, when you moved companies, you shared that you had to also learn a new technology domain. You weren't thinking like lifting your expertise to a new company. So what lessons can you share? How did you fit it in with everything that Maxime, has already mentioned?
So adding to Maxime, and Erin also mentioned earlier that you may not know certain things in your existing domain, like your domain that you're working on, but you come in with a lot of experience already. And so it might feel overwhelming in the beginning to like onboard to a new company, new people, and new technology, new processes, but you already have like a foundation that you can build on. You can already contribute, and you have a lot of transferable skills that you don't really think about until you start working in a new domain. And then you bring also a fresh perspective. So if you're working with people who are focused in one domain, you're bringing a whole different view of, hey, have you considered this? Have you considered this other use case? So don't like it. It might feel daunting in the beginning, and it certainly did, but over time, you get more used to it and kind of get more comfortable as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Sally. So I think, I've seen a lot of questions pop up in the Q&A. So if our panelists are okay, I'm gonna pick a couple, okay, to make sure that we get through some, and then we'll continue where we were. So the first one says, if you were to look for someone to help you with your onboarding, who would that person be based on your experience? Would you look for a mentor to learn more from a role you are new with? And if so, would you look for one internal to your company or from your network? Any hands raised? Who would like to have a go first? Jocelyn?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I would say definitely look for a mentor. And I would say both internally and externally. It's really important to have that context internally, but it's also important to have the opinions of others that are outside for like a broader range of knowledge. I have many mentors that I've accumulated over the years. So if anything's ever questionable or I really don't understand what's going on, I reach out to them. But also reaching out to somebody internally as well is awesome. One great thing that the New York Times does is assign you an onboarding buddy. So I had an onboarding buddy who is a fellow staff engineer, Panina. She's great. So she was the person, and honestly, my mentor going into this, who I would ask all of the questions, and that was her role, and she was super helpful with that. So yeah, definitely both.
Thank you, Jocelyn. All hands are up. So Maxime, then Sally, and then Erin.
Yeah, it's great advice. I would just only add that, leverage your manager as well. They are invested in your success. They want you to be successful. And so try to leverage that relationship and to help you kind of, move forward and gain the knowledge you need.
Thank you. Sally?
I want to also add that internally, don't discount people who are on the technical ladder who are still more junior than you, because while they may not have as much experience in the industry in general, they will probably have more context and more experience within the product that you're working on. So don't discount these people and definitely get their opinion. And also find their pain points, because then you can also use that to fix things within the company as well.
Thank you, Sally. Erin?
Yeah, and while it's not easy to do when you're brand new and you're still figuring out who's who, but as soon as you can, maybe find a peer that can be, your buddy, your go-to person when you need to. Maybe sometimes it's just vent, just a rubber duck, bounce ideas off of, have someone who can maybe point you to resources faster. like, who should I ask about this? Who would be a good person to talk about this? I found just I've been so much more successful, and it's so rewarding when you have that peer who's, maybe around your level or kind of dealing with the same problems that you have, that you can just always go to and commiserate with, bounce ideas off of, and support each other and sort of like, root each other on. It's really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I found that actually coming together with people who were onboarding with me, even if it was different roles, it goes a really long way. It's amazing. So one more question, and then we'll go back to the script. I think Matt says, I like what Maxime and Erin both said about you having been hired for a reason. Do you ever feel like an expert at this level, or do you always feel knowledge is incomplete and you have to trust your instinct and experience to some degree? Show of hands, Maxime.
Yeah, I think you have to think about it as breadth and depth. So you will always want to build your breadth of knowledge, and that's always an ongoing process you always want to work towards. And then you might want to pick a few areas where you want to be deep in as well. So gaining that depth as well. But you won't be an expert in everything. You won't have the depth of knowledge in all areas, but you do want to have a working understanding of various areas that you can dive into later as needed.
Thank you. Erin?
Yeah, basically just writing on what Maxime just said. It's a concept of, the T-shaped engineer, to have a lot of breadth, but, certain topics that you have depth on. When I'm feeling imposter syndrome, or when I'm feeling like, oh, geez, I don't know as much as so-and-so does. They know so much more than I do. When I start having those feelings of insecurity, I remind myself, like, I'm a T. I bring to the table a lot of breadth and then depth in some things, and maybe other people don't have. So it's totally normal. And it's actually great that I'm working with other people who know more than I do about certain things, because I can learn from them. And it's not on me to know everything. Like, we can all work together and kind of overlap our T's to become a full team. So I don't have to know everything, and I need to take that pressure off myself. But it also means that I've got more I can learn, and that's exciting.
That's great, Erin. Next, Sally, and then Jocelyn.
Yeah, one thing to also add is as you work more in the industry, you start seeing patterns, and you can apply those across different domains. And even, for example, like as you do, let's say, code review, your brain will just pick something up before you realize that you need to focus a little bit and spend more time on it. And yeah, you consider that as a hunch, but that's just your brain working in the background. So trust it. You definitely have a lot to contribute. As Erin mentioned, you're expert in different areas than other people, and that's what makes a great team.
Thank you. And Jocelyn?
Yeah, I just had one other thing to add. I just want to say that being an expert is very subjective to the person, to the industry, to the company, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel as though I am an expert in some things, and it's possible that another person may not feel as though I am an expert in something. So I think it's really important that you feel comfortable and you feel like you are an expert in whatever you have decided to drill down on. I do agree that, again, T-shaped developer, have a really good breadth of knowledge, but also drill down. So I feel as though I'm an expert in a couple of things. So just know that it's entirely subjective, and that really you need to be comfortable and confident with your knowledge on the subject in order to feel like an expert. I think that's really important.
Thank you, Jocelyn. I love the enthusiasm for answering questions that just came up. We're going to go back to the webinar. I know there's a few open Q&As. Some of them are actually related to questions that are coming up. So we don't have time to get to this. We'll answer them in Slack at the end. But we're going to jump back, to our next topic, which is about learning and communication styles. And Maxime, what are the different ways you use to get to know people?
Yeah, this is an important question, because it's about building effective relationship is a key objective to onboarding at this level. So getting to know people takes time and effort, but it's well worth the effort to build a strong network with your organization. There are different ways I used to get to know people. It was one, go on a listening tour. This is the ability to make connections with key team members and make a connection with their area of focus. This is a great opportunity to learn about a team, the architecture they support, and the challenges they face. Schedule to get to know you meetings with your colleagues, including team members, peers, and leaders across different functions outside of engineering. So these meetings provide a dedicated space to learn about their background, their roles, and the aspirations. If you are in an office setting, a casual coffee or lunch, these informal settings are often lead to more relaxed and open conversations. And practice active listening during these interactions. This means showing empathy, asking follow-up questions. These are opportunities not only to get different perspectives, but also to ramp up on how an organization works. And this might be challenging for some. I know it's for myself, but be open and willing to share information about your background and interest. This openness can foster a great atmosphere where others feel comfortable sharing as well. And as always, who else should I, ask them who else should I talk to, and go and then talk to them as well, and ask them the same question until you've kind of closed the loop and have, met many of your colleagues.
Thank you, Maxime. I think before I ask you the next question, Jocelyn, there's actually someone in the Q&A who I think is an introvert like me and Erin, and has asked about kind of go-to questions for one-on-ones. So Jocelyn, this is very related, I think, to your question. So is there anything to add to what Maxime said? What are your preferred ways to get to know people? How do you make sure that you have time for it?
So I'm going to relate to Erin here. I'm an introvert as well. I have social anxiety out the wazoo. So when it comes to having to schedule these coffee talks and these, I'm just like, oh, I hate it. I hate it so much, but it's very vital. So I do it. So when I'm onboarding, I tend to do all of my coffee meetups within the first week, if not within the first 2 days. So that's everybody on the team, including my manager, literally everyone, product owners that I may be interacting with and things like that. I find that it's really important. So as much as I don't like it, I do those one-on-one interactions. But for me personally, I love a Slack message me anything. I'm always there, an open book in that regards, but I also have to take into account that other people don't like conversing that way. So it's really important for me to know how the other person communicates, which way they prefer to be communicated to in that sense. My social anxiety usually doesn't deal with one-on-ones, but it's really important to do so at this level. It's expected, actually, I would say.
Yeah, I agree that it's worth the effort, but at the start you're just kind of dreading it. Yeah, I know. So now on to Erin. This is like an introvert club here. You've mentioned the importance of knowing your learning style here when you onboard. So how can you use that to your advantage when you're new?
Yeah, I think leveraging your learning style, knowing what works best for you for obtaining and retaining information, can help you develop your onboarding plan that'll be the most efficient and effective uniquely to you. For example, if you're a visual learner, maybe seek out architectural or UML diagrams that document the systems you need to get up to speed on. And as you build your knowledge of a given system, if there isn't already a diagram, you can build one and help, lock in what you've learned and then share that learning with others. If you're a verbal learner, then maybe you target reading through the docs first, or start early on looking at code reviews. For verbal learners, it may be easier to just look at code examples or trace through the code to get an understanding of how things work and how systems integrate. On the other hand, if you're an auditory learner, reading through the code may not work as well for you. Perhaps you absorb information better when you hear something explained. So maybe you schedule some pair programming sessions or some walkthroughs of applications or architecture. And then finally, if you're a kinesthetic learner, you learn best by doing. So maybe the fastest way for you to gain understanding is to write some code or fix a bug or perform some QA testing for someone else. Maybe grab some small non-critical path tickets to work from different areas. That might give you the fastest path for ramping up. So when we know how we learn and remember best, we can tailor our plan to utilize those approaches that will work best for us. And we can avoid spending time on the approaches that we know aren't as conducive to learning for us. That being said, and I think Jocelyn kind of touched on this, we want to be flexible. So we need to maybe push ourselves to build the skills and to build comfort in the areas that we're not as comfortable with, because that might be the medium that works better for someone else. And so we need to be able to support them and in what mediums work best for them.
I love what you shared, Erin, about having almost like a common, onboarding, but then customizing it to your strengths. And there's expectations, yes, but I think that allows for a more inclusive, type of staff plus engineer, because otherwise we'd always be kind of promoting and hiring people that are always the same. And that's by no means what, organizations or even, we want to have in our teams. So next, Sally, I think Jocelyn already pointed that she really likes the Slack messages because it does help her a lot more to engage with people. So can you share some insight about, using Slack, how you use that to kind of meet people and kind of share interests, and how that's using your org?
Sure. So within our org, we have a Slack channel for basically the entire observability organization. So people, engineers, managers, product owners, support. And so one really interesting thing is twice a week, there's a question posted. Usually in the beginning of the week, it's like, how was your weekend? And people can share what they've been doing over the weekend, share pictures. And of course, it's all optional. And with the team being distributed through different countries and different time zones, that really works great, because then I may not schedule a one-on-one with you directly over Zoom, but I can respond to a Slack channel and have that be an async way. And then in the middle of the week, we have like a bank of questions that we pick from, and that's a more targeted conversation. So, and it's not work related. So for example, it's like, hey, what was the book that you last read that you would recommend? Or what type of movies do you like to watch that you would recommend? And then the conversations grow organically. And just seeing people interact with each other kind of outside of the work context, it's really interesting, because then as I get into meetings with them, I can relate. I was like, oh, this is the manager who's making all these changes to their house. So let me ask and build that relationship. So that really helped foster camaraderie among the employees as well.
Yeah, this is great, because I think that on top of building almost like the map of the organization, you're kind of building the map of like the individuals that work in there, so you can kind of relate more closely. Amazing. So now we're going to move on to our last topic of today, which is beginning to build a network and key relationships. We already pointed a bit to that, but let's focus in more detail before we wrap up. So Jocelyn, what strategies do you use face-to-face versus kind of remotely to build key relationships? Can different ways of working kind of complement each other?
Yeah, so I am fully remote. I have not yet to meet my teammates in person. So I have a lot of experience in this. So one of the first things, aside from doing like your coffee chat, your 15-minute introduction chats, for me, it's really important when I see like weekly or scheduled meetings for, say, staff engineers within my org or staff engineers with the company as a whole, those types of meetings that typically sometimes people, to kind of cut down on meetings, they would skip. Those are the meetings that I want to go to, because otherwise I don't have the ability to just bump into somebody in the hallway or go over and to their desk and grab them for coffee, etc. So that has been a really, really important thing for me, to go ahead and go to those meetings, because honestly, when you think of issues that you could potentially have on your team, with your systems, with your services, whichever, chances are that somebody that is within the same scope as you, Staff Plus, has already had those issues somewhere else, and they have that knowledge. And I think that's just a great way to do that. I really do not skip those meetings at all. I prioritize them, if anything. That's just really important for, as somebody that's remote for me. It makes it feel as though there's some camaraderie there when I start, going in and talking with those other engineers of my level. So it's been really extremely helpful for that.
Thank you. For some reason, I thought you were working on hybrid mode, but let's see, what Sally has to add to what you said, because Sally, at your most recent job, you onboarded fully remote. So what advice do you have to add on top of what Jocelyn already said about people in similar situations? Sorry.
Sure. Yeah, so a couple of things is be intentional. It's very easy to, if you're working remotely, to just stay in front of your monitor and not interact with people. So make sure you're intentional to reach out to people. The other thing is set clear boundaries. So for me, as I'm working from home and our teams are distributed across the globe, I'm not going to attend all meetings because they're not always in a favorable time zone for me, and I will have to miss those. And so, what can I do to make life easier and more asynchronous so that we can get work done and not burn everyone out? The other thing is, again, because it's just me and my monitor for the most part, it's hard for me to assess that, hey, it's time to stop working now. I've already put in like so many hours. So setting that clear boundary of this is enough for today. There is an infinite amount of work. There is so much to learn as I onboard, and I can't get it done in one day. So it's okay to stop and continue the next day.
Thank you. And we only have a couple more questions, so let's speed through. Erin, what are different ways you have used as an introvert to get to know people as you onboard during your day-to-day?
Yeah, and I think we've kind of touched on this multiple times, which is great because it's a theme, but certainly it can be difficult for me to have these face-to-face meetings with people I don't know very well yet. But in the experience that I had here at Lab, being forced to schedule and meet people, with a bunch of people on a list just given to me by my manager, it proved to me how massively beneficial it is to connect with people early on. It was huge to get all the context and history that would help me get up to speed in my role quickly. And it really jumpstart my relationship building with the members of my team because I could get to know them a little bit more. I could ask them about their goals, if there was anything they're struggling with or need support on, or, how can I help mentor them? So knowing how important this process was to my successful onboarding taught me that it's worth pushing through those nerves and discomfort that I may be feeling as an introvert. There are so many times as a technical leader that I may be in a situation that makes me nervous or stretches my comfort zone. But when I remind myself of the importance and the why behind doing a given thing, it helps me say yes to doing those things that may be scary, but are crucial to my growth and success. But sort of beyond that, like Sally was talking about, kind of icebreaker questions, we do that in a ton of our team meetings here at Lab. And it's a great way to just kind of get to know your teammates better and just get people talking. And then also, I think like Jocelyn was saying, opportunities in Slack to talk about not work related things and get to know people better that way. My team has a posting every day. It was sort of like, how are you feeling today? Are you green, yellow, or red? And you can elaborate on that. You can share pictures, whatever you want to share with your team. It gives you that opportunity, and you can opt out if you don't feel comfortable. But those offer us little points throughout the day to kind of connect more.
Thank you, Erin. And Maxine, this last question is for you. I think you already touched on it as well, but let's go over it. You mentioned that you do a listening tour with your teams. Can you tell us more about what purposes does it serve you?
Yeah, this is something I'm doing now in my onboarding process. I worked with my manager to initiate a series of meetings. We have about 45 plus teams in my engineering org. So we've called this a listening tour, and it's kind of a more formalized process than what's already being described here. But as the name implies, my primary role in these meetings is just to listen and learn about the team's context, the architectural systems they support, and their engineering practices. The goal is to actually establish a connection with the team and gain insights into their ongoing work. I've been using this time to gather information and data to kind of before forming my opinions. So this ensures that I have a well-informed understanding, and my perceptions, the perceptions I hear from leaders and others may be based actually on concrete evidence and rather than just preconceived notions. So the listening tour has provided a high-level orientation that I hope can act as a catalyst for more in-depth discussions in the future. So I found this listening tour as a great way to onboard, and I recommend it for anyone at the Staff Plus role who is starting at a new organization.
Amazing. Thank you, Maxime. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your insights today. Now we're going to have to wrap up because we're going to run out of time. So let's go around the room and summarize in a sentence. What is your top tip of what to avoid as you onboard to your new organization? You can take your message to senior ICs or to managers. So now we're going to go in reverse alphabetical order. So we're going to start with Sally.
Don't overwhelm yourself and pace yourself as you onboard. It's whatever company you're working for wasn't built in a day. You're not going to learn it all in a day. So pace yourself.
Thank you. Now, Maxime.
Yeah, passing judgment too quickly can hinder collaboration. So something we should definitely avoid when we're new to a Staff Plus role. But holding back judgment doesn't mean you shouldn't offer feedback and suggestions. It means that you approach new situations with an open mind to understand the context before making any conclusions.
Thank you. And now, Jocelyn.
I just want to say that it's okay to not know everything. It's beyond okay. You're not expected to know everything. Actually, you shouldn't. So just give yourself the grace when you're onboarding.
And finally, Erin.
I think for me, biggest, probably most challenging tip is to try to avoid perfectionism. And even though this onboarding time is the time we most want to show a perfect version of ourselves, we know everything already, things are easy for us, we get everything right the first time, whatever, we have to fight this. It's so important for us to model being imperfect humans, and that even as Staff Plus engineers, there are things we don't know or that we can get wrong. So modeling some vulnerability can be so important to the more junior engineers, and it can help create a culture of psychological safety on your team, and it can help you connect and form more authentic relationships with others.
Thank you, Erin. I really love that. That really touched me. So thank you so much all for the good insights in today's panel. We're going to be heading to the LeadDev Slack, and there's a channel called Staff Plus. We'll be copying the questions that are remaining here there to continue the discussion. And thank you for joining, and we hope to see you next time. Bye.